Hey guys, welcome to this introductory episode to my new podcast, The Daniel Generation. I wanted to spend some time at first just telling you a bit about what this podcast is going to cover and who it's for, and then in the next couple episodes we'll start getting into it. Now, the best way to share with you what this is all about is to tell you about two different narratives. Now, in the lives of young Christians today, we have a pretty difficult lot in that we have two narratives kind of competing for our attention and our affection. On the one hand, we have our faith telling us how to best live and who to follow and who to worship and giving us guidelines for everything. And on the other hand, we have the culture competing for that attention and almost asking the exact opposite in some cases. The narrative of our culture kind of goes like this. It's a narrative of limitlessness. There are no boundaries. There are no authorities. There are no limitations to you, what you want, and who you can be. And whatever you want to be, whatever you feel like, that's what you should do. And on one hand, this sounds really liberating. Like there are no rules. I can just do whatever I want. It sounds really fun at first. But I think what we're starting to feel as young people in general, and especially as young Christians, is that actually doesn't give us much help when we run into problems. It doesn't give us guidelines or authorities to trust. It doesn't give us anything to fall back on, and not really any greater sense of purpose either. And so a lot of us are left wanting with this whole ultimate liberation sort of thinking, this limitlessness, this self-actualization narrative. But it's rampant and it's competing for our attention every day. Now, on the other hand, we have our faith, which offers an alternative, but for many of us, it kind of feels outdated. Or if not that, maybe we're committed to it and it just is so hard to live in our current world. We don't know how to even live as Christians in this current moment. And so I think that presents the two extremes in response to this problem. We have, on one hand, people who see the narrative of culture and see the narrative of the faith they were brought up in, and they ditch it all together and they want to just go do what they want, and regardless of the consequences, live like this. Or maybe a little less drastic, they'll kind of just compartmentalize their faith and then also have their other things, their job, their friends, what they do with their time, and it can all be neat and separate, and they don't have to think about the, consequences of how those would interact. Now, on the other extreme, we have people who look at this and go, maybe that's a mess, I don't want to do that. And then they run to the faith, but not in a way that's actually helpful. They kind of want to just go back in time to an era that didn't have the modern problem, that didn't have the current struggles, and just escape. I don't think that's helpful either. In fact, I think that's actually an awful lot like the culture. Whenever things get tough, we don't challenge them, we don't stand up for them, we don't find new ways. We actually just kind of run off and do our own thing over here and separate and isolate. We need a third way. If young Christians are going to carry the faith that's been brought down to us through the generations into the future, if we're going to embody the truth of God and be the people of God on God's mission, then we have to find a new way. Something's got to give, and we have to find a way to embody the fullness of our faith, the fullness of orthodoxy, in a way that's helpful to our culture without giving up the faith and becoming like the culture. And that's the sticky mess that we're in. Now, I don't have a complete answer here, and I don't know that any one stream of the Christian faith does, and I think that's why we need a podcast like this. That's why I'm starting it. I think we need to have a conversation. And I think the more people we talk to that are young Christians out in the world living it right now, and people ministering to those Christians, and just get everyone involved in this, we can start coming up with answers. We can start formulating a way to be faithful in this next generation. Now, there is a story in the Bible that reminds me of this, because it's not a unique situation in that it hasn't happened before. I think back to Daniel. Daniel and his friends were faithful Israelites in the Babylonian exile. And even though Babel wanted to re-educate them, rid them of their faith, their values, and their traditions, and make them Babylonians, make them in their own image, Daniel and his friends, even when going through all of that, stayed faithful. They didn't falter. And sometimes, that meant getting thrown into a furnace or a lion's den. But other times, that actually benefited the culture around them in a way that ended with the king of Babel praising Yahweh is God. I think we can learn a lot from Daniel and people similar to Daniel throughout history. And that's why this podcast is called The Daniel Generation. I think our generation is just like that. We're exiles in a culture that's foreign and hostile. And it's wanting to take our faith from us. But if we get together and in prayer and in conversation talk about these things, I think we can find a way forward. And so that's the basis of the podcast. We'll do interviews, we'll do all sorts of discussions on modern discipleship and things like that. But I can't think of all these things by myself. So what sort of things do you guys want to see? What sort of topics do you want to cover? What would be most edifying to you as a young Christian trying to live faithfully in today's world? Go ahead, shoot me an email. Go ahead, leave a comment. And we'll be sure to touch on those things. Whatever you guys want, we'll do the best we can to include it and make sure that we do whatever we can to really edify the young church. With that, thanks for listening. I hope you're excited about what we're going to be doing here. We'll have the content coming as soon as possible. Just have to pull some strings, get some people together, and we'll get it started here. In the meantime, if this resonated with you or you're excited about it or you know someone else who might be, please go ahead and leave a review on iTunes. Give us a share. That way more people can hear about us and start to tune in as things get rolling. Thanks again for watching or listening, and I hope to see you next time on the Daniel Generation.